And somebody said to him, Mr. Slack, what's this? He said, I have absolutely no idea. Just sprang out of the moss last night. And he said, and look, it's captured a vole already. And there's a vole floating there, dead.
Hi, and welcome to Nepenthes Talk with Rob Cantley. I'm actually not Rob Cantley. This is Rob Cantley. And I'm lucky enough to be one of Rob's friends. My name is James Haig Streeter, and I just so happen to be visiting this amazing nursery. And the reason why we're flipping the script today, and I'm interviewing Rob, is by complete coincidence, while I've been staying here, Rob has had some amazing news. And so I thought that I'd actually talk to Rob about what this amazing news is and ask some additional questions about how he's come to have this incredible, world-famous nursery. So, Rob, what's your news today?
Well, this is very exciting news for us. It's a pinnacle of achievement, really, for us, for the staff and everybody involved, because it's taken 15 years of breeding to achieve, but we got through the post today an officially amazing document. It says on it, officially amazing. And look at this. There we have a certificate. And this certificate is for the largest cultivated carnivorous plant trap by volume, which is 2.986 litres, 10.1 fluid ounces, for a pitcher belonging to a cultivar of the hybrid Nepenthes cebuyanensis cross Morelliana, provisionally designated Nepenthes Titanic, grown by the team at Borneo Exotics in Lindula, Sri Lanka, and measured on 16th of April, 2025. So it's a huge thrill for us to have something like this, and an honour, really, and a huge vote of thanks to dedicated staff all around the place, such as Bala and people like that who have actually been working on the cultivation of this plant. So Nepenthes Titanic is now officially a world record holder.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Well done.
And only to be overthrown by Nepenthes iceberg, which I'm sure will be coming. It's a race now to produce a bigger one. I know other people are already on it, so it's a competition. Yes.
No, that's amazing.
Thank you.
I mean, you mentioned that the original cross was done a couple of years ago. Do you want to? How long has it actually taken?
I wish it was only a couple of years.
Right.
I believe the pollination was done in 2008.
Wow.
By Diana, my beloved wife, using Morelliana pollen taken from our lowland nurseries. We had lowland nurseries near Colombo in those days, and gigantic Morelliana plants brought up here, lovingly pollinated onto our, probably I think our only flowering cebuyanensis in those days. And then we had to produce the seed, and then we had to put it into tissue culture, into the lab for multiplication, and we had all these clones, and we picked one that we thought might be a good one, and it turned out to be as big as any that we've seen so far.
Amazing. So I'm really curious about this whole process of, you have all these seeds, you grow them up in the lab, you then have these little plants. At that stage, how do you correctly choose what will become a huge plant? How can you predict that?
You can't. It's a process of trial and error, and that's why it takes so long, because you have to put these. Just say you had 24 clones. I think we had 24 clones of this, different clones. A clone being an individual seed, an individual plant from a seed. You have to grow them all out, grow them up until they get big enough to see the differences in characteristics. Then you decide whether to discontinue that clone or continue it. Even if you discontinue it, we still had the original plants that we planted in the nursery when we were doing the testing.
Right. But you must have been growing up some of these assorted clones, because otherwise you wouldn't have had this huge mature plants. How did that work?
Well, the plants that we have which are large are the early ones that came out of the lab of the individual clones.
Right.
And after we did the choice, and we kept them in the nurseries. We don't destroy them. We love the plants, so we grew them until they were big anyway, as we do with things that we don't necessarily use commercially, because we are Nepenthes enthusiasts at heart.
Yes.
So we have very big plants of the individual plant outs, but the combined clones that we sell under a particular BE code, we've never actually made the effort to select any of those and grow them to large size.
Right. And is there, I know this is extremely difficult to do, but is there a way of taking the plant which you have, because you do have the one very large mature clone, and from that mature plant put it back in the lab? Is that something you can do?
That is the third option, which I hadn't come to. To put in Nepenthes back into the lab is an extremely difficult procedure. Can be done. We're working on it. We have, as you mentioned in another podcast, we've done PhDs working on this. But every time you attempt it, you're destroying a part of the original plant. So if you take the tip off the plants, the nodes beneath it will grow, and you can then cut those off, the growing node off, take it to the lab and attempt to sterilize it. But Nepenthes are they're contaminated with internal organisms, which make it very, very difficult to clean the tissue without killing the plant. Not impossible.
Wow.
It can be done. We've done it. Other people have done it. Whether it can be done with this remains to be seen, but we're certainly going to try.
And for those who are not fortunate like myself to have come to your nursery and have a look around, maybe you could explain a little bit more about the lab and why you have it, because certainly when I first knew of Borneo Exotics, the first thing that comes to mind are the amazing plants. But you don't really think, well, how are those grown? And you imagine people are making cuttings, you're growing from seeds, maybe some guys like in some kind of, sophisticated potting shed, growing lots of plants. But when I came here, you actually have, in effect, a hardcore biotech lab, like full of people in white coats who walk through air showers and sterilize themselves, and they have PhDs and master's degrees and all these sort of fancy subjects, which is incredible, because here we are sort of up in the mountains of Sri Lanka, and that's like the last thing you'd expect.
Yes. You didn't see the cannabis plants on the shelves, no?
So why is that necessary to even grow them in the first place?
Well, the traditional method of growing, of course, is sowing seeds in a nursery or taking cuttings in a nursery. And that's exactly what we're doing in a lab. The reason it's done in a lab is that they grow about 10 times faster, because there's no pressures on them. There's no threats from pathogens, from pests and diseases, and they've got perfect nutrient. And the other thing is that, as I said, Nepenthes are very, very difficult to put into tissue culture from a mature plant. But the seed, it's extremely easy to sterilize the seed. Many of you out there, I think, who are watching this will have actually tried it at home. Right. Sterilizing a Nepenthes seed and putting it into sterile culture is a very simple process. So we do a lot of crossbreeding and hybridization, and we take the seed, we sterilize it, we put it into the lab. We also sow some in the nurseries too. We put some into the lab. And within a year, they've way outgrown the ones in the nurseries, because they've got perfect nutrition, and we can take cuttings from them in the lab just as you would inside a nursery or in your own garden with any plant. You take a cutting, you root it, take a cutting, you root it, and you multiply it up that way. We do exactly the same thing in a laboratory with under sterile conditions. That's really the concept, and the technique is actually very simple. In theory. Of course, there's a lot more to it than that in terms of getting it to grow well, and you've got to be careful what chemicals you use. We don't use some of the chemicals that other labs have been using, which can cause mutations. We're very careful not to do that. So we sacrifice speed of growth a little bit for safety.
Wow. No, it's fascinating. I mean, clearly this is more than just a a passion for you. We're surrounded by thousands of these incredible plants, and you have this very well-deserved certificate, which is really like a lifetime achievement award in many ways. I mean, how did this all begin for you in the first place?
I think the word you're looking for is obsession.
Right.
Not necessarily passion. How did it come about? I was, like everybody else in UK anyway, when I was a child in the 70s, I bought a Venus flytrap. I killed it. But before I killed it, I had some fun with it. I probably hadn't killed it. It had probably gone into dormancy, but of course, like everybody else, I threw it away, didn't know anything about it. And lost focus, lost interest in them until my parents went to work. My father went to work in Brunei in 1979, and I was at university. I went there for holidays, for vacation, and immediately saw these incredible plants growing on the hillside behind the house. Rafflesiana, gracilis. I didn't know what they were at the time.
Right.
Just became very interested in them, as you would, because who's seen a plant like this before?
Yeah.
And part of me had a scientific fascination, but another part of me was thinking, is there a market for this? I've never seen these for sale. So in those days, it was well before the internet, so it was all snail mail, and it took a long time. But I found there was a nursery in UK called Borneo Exotics.
Yes.
So I got in touch with them, a gentleman called Adrian Slack, who was a wonderful character. And he immediately wrote back and said, we'd love to buy some from you because all we have are 2 species. That's all we can ever get hold of. And there were supposed to be 3 species in Brunei where I was staying at that time. And of course, when I actually started looking, there were many more than 3 species in the lowlands alone. And then, of course, Brunei has mountains.
Right.
So I started trekking into the mountains and discovering that there were more species. Many of which have been lost to cultivation, in fact, nearly all of them. And I started growing them, getting the seeds, growing them in a simple nursery. By simple, I mean simple. I couldn't afford pots. It was Coke tins with the tops cut off and holes punched in the bottom. I still have the photograph somewhere. So it was just a way of making a little bit of money on the side to enable me to stay in Brunei, where my father was living, to actually study the plants and learn more about them. So it became a passion. Yep.
So it sounds like you've actually spent a lot of time actually in the jungle, finding plants, trekking through different places. I mean, that must have been an amazing experience. Are there any particular moments that spring to mind, through that whole experience?
A myriad of them. I'm on first name terms with many of the leeches of Brunei. I think. Yes, I mean there's many spring to mind. Getting lost, getting stranded on top of mountains, and guides running away in the Philippines because they've seen a ghost and leaving us in the middle of nowhere. All great looking back on it, but at the time it could sometimes be fairly terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, literally stuck in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a jungle. Wow.
The jungle is about as wet as it gets. It rains nearly all the time. And
but it's called the rainforest.
It's called the rainforest.
For good reason, right?
Exactly that. And most of them, the Nepenthes, either grow on top of mountain ridges where they get a bit of light, which are quite inaccessible sometimes, very steep, or they grow epiphytically on trees where you can't reach them. When it comes to rainforest Nepenthes, the lowland ones, the coastal ones, often grow in sandy areas and you can easily access them, like the ones growing near where you live in Penang,
Yes.
Alba marginata, Ampillaria gracilis, Rafflesiana, and that kind of thing.
Yes.
So some of them are very difficult to access, and we could only photograph them. We couldn't even see them, touch them, and it was quite a challenge to get the seeds. We couldn't take the plants because we couldn't grow highland plants in Brunei. There's no point cutting the plants off.
Right.
So we were looking for seeds, and we often had to go back 3 or 4 times to actually find the seed of what we were looking for.
And there's clearly one plant which you're very well known for discovering and saving. I mean, it has your name and it happens to be growing right here. Nepenthes Rob Cantley.
Oh, there's one.
Yeah. is that the only plant that you discovered in the wild, or there were other ones as well?
Well, with Nepenthes, I come across a lot of plants which I didn't recognise, and I photographed, and I never thought I could discover a new species. So I didn't imagine I would ever, that's taxonomists and botanists that do that. So I photographed, for example, in 1981 or 1982, what was later called Nepenthes Harrelliana, and I'd already discovered it. I've got pictures of me standing next to it, but that's one example. Actually, it turned out that Harrelliana actually was a species that had been described decades before as Nepenthes mollis, so it wasn't brand new.
Right.
So in terms of discovering brand new Nepenthes species, nothing I can actually point to and say I discovered that first. But I was amongst the first to rediscover them after they'd been out of cultivation for best part of a century or many decades, which was always a thrill to see something which was you've only ever seen in a print, a black and white print, in a book like Dancer's monograph of Nepenthes, which is a really seminal work. And then to actually find it and look at it and know you're the first person to actually look at it and recognise what it is. Of course, the jungle people, the Dayaks and Ebans and Kadazans, and they all see them.
Yes.
They use them as cooking vessels sometimes. Right. Yeah. But to actually recognise.
I've actually had that in Penang. Ampullaria is actually used to cook rice, and I may get some hate mail for this, but I've actually eaten rice cooked inside an ampullaria.
I have many times as well, because it's fascinating that in Penang, which is a long way from Borneo, the Bornean indigenous people, the Ebans, do exactly the same thing. They use the ampullaria pitchers to boil their rice in. So there's a common sort of wisdom that has developed independently, one assumes, and as well as the fluid in the unopened pitcher is useful for stomach ailments.
Wow.
And that's actually common wisdom to several parts of Asia that they must have discovered it independently, I assume, whereby the fluid, it's got the right pH and enzymes to settle an upset stomach. And it's sterile when it's not open. So
right.
All interesting stuff.
The other kind of common wisdom, if you like, is, at least what I've heard living in Penang, is that they will only use ampullaria as a cooking vessel because they say other pitchers are poisonous. And the interesting thing is that ampullaria, as you well know, is one of the few pitchers that doesn't actually have digestive enzymes. So it's very interesting that people who I guess have tried to cook rice in the past and it didn't taste good, they're probably using some other pitcher which of course does have digestive enzymes because it's carnivorous. Ampullaria doesn't. It relies more on like falling debris and leaves and things like that. And somehow people have discovered that this is actually the one to use as a cooking vessel.
You're never too old to learn, are you? Because that is actually a new way. I was aware of that, that ampullaria is used and others aren't, and I hadn't considered the reason why. So that, like David Attenborough says, you're never too old to learn. And and I've just learned something from you because I knew that ampullaria doesn't produce enzymes, and there's quite an ecology living in an ampullaria pitcher. There's an amazing ecology that even spiders that only live there, there's a particular spider lives in ampullaria pitchers. But I didn't think, I'm sure you're right, that the pitcher body itself, maybe because it doesn't have those glands to secrete the enzymes, is not toxic.
Yes.
Whereas maybe other Nepenthes actually have toxicity in their tissues. It's very likely.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. You said something earlier which I found very interesting and also starting off my own fascination with carnivorous plants in the kind of late 70s noticed as well that kind of back then, before there are nice coffee table books with gorgeous pictures like Adrian Slack's book, the only way you could see a picture of a Nepenthes was a Victorian print. And you touched on something very interesting, that if you go all the way back to the time of the Victorians, it was actually almost like the thing to grow Nepenthes. You'd have all these very rich people sending botanists off to explore and bring back fancy plants, and the Nepenthes were to the top of the list. So back then, there must have been many plants in cultivation. My guess is that maybe they also did hybridization, just like you do today. And for some reason, that all stopped. I don't know why. Maybe you know why. And it wasn't really until, my guess, that you actually started growing plants again that kind of the knowledge and that spark of interest kind of rekindled. So I'm wondering, A, do you know why the Victorians, that interest stopped? And what are your thoughts about you, in effect, starting this up again, almost a century later, having to rediscover how to grow them again, I assume? I don't know. Tell me.
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
How much time do you have? But there's a lot to unwrap in what you just said.
Right.
Unpack. It was very popular in the 19th century. Nepenthes were hugely popular, more so than orchids, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a status symbol if you had a hothouse, as they called it, in the Victorian era, particularly in UK. I'm not so sure about the American situation, but in the UK, if you had a hothouse or stove house, if you had Nepenthes, that was the thing, because they were so inaccessible to people. They had to be shipped physically. They took the plants out of the jungle and they put them on the decks of ships with a greenhouse, a little miniature greenhouse around it called an Edwardian case, so that they could survive. And they shipped them for how many months would it take a sailing ship to get back to UK? And the attrition rate must have been quite high. And then they went into greenhouses owned by Veitchii and Sons quite often, as one of the main ones in Chelsea, to be re-established. And you can imagine how expensive they would have been.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Unbelievable. So the best collections existed that I'm aware of anyway at that time in Europe. Certainly there were very good ones in UK. Then the First World War came along, and there was as I understand it, if I'm correct, so I'm no historian, but there was a ban on using coal for heating greenhouses. And therefore, the collections died.
Wow.
And sad to say that probably quite a few of the collectors died as well, because the attrition rate amongst the males and being sent off in the First World War to the trenches was huge. So they lapsed into more or less in obscurity, except for academic circles. There were still people writing papers on them. But in terms of cultivation, they got pretty much forgotten.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
Well, in the 1970s, late 70s, when I first discovered the possible potential commercially, it was before the days of the internet, so I contacted Adrian Slack. Now, that was a company called Borneo Exotics in UK. Adrian wrote a very good book on Nepenthes. I'm proud to say that the back cover photograph is mine.
Right.
But he wanted input on how to write the chapter on the cultivating Nepenthes, because I'd already been growing them a bit. Together, we started to popularize them. I was growing them in Brunei, shipping them, and all the correspondence by snail mail. It was terribly slow and relaxed, which suited me just fine, as I was still a student. And I wasn't expecting I didn't employ anybody. I wasn't expecting to make much money. One of my first employees actually is a famous name, but I shan't mention it in this video. I think he probably wouldn't like it, but he became famous later. And we gradually popularized them. But if you go back to what the Victorians did, James, they popularized the plants, and they were actually breeding hybrids then. They had advanced breeding programs. So the Victorian hybrids, there's names like Mixter, Curtii, a lot of the old names, the plants still sometimes exist. And Diariana is a Victorian hybrid, and it's a cross between two other Victorian hybrids involving, amongst other things, Northiana, involving Maxima. So it was a cross between two existing Victorian hybrids. So they were that advanced. They were doing F2 crosses and beyond.
Right.
It really what they were keen and pioneering, and much of the knowledge was lost. But as it happens, we happen to have here Nepenthes diariana picture.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So this was made in around the 1880s. So where are we now? 170 years ago?
Yeah.
Is that right? About 170 years ago.
Amazing.
And it's still in cultivation today, which is absolutely amazing that it was kept going, presumably from cuttings.
Right.
It's not in tissue culture that I'm aware of. So it's from cuttings. And it goes to show also the longevity of Nepenthes, because 120, 180 years, it's still going. So please don't ask me how long a Nepenthes lives for, because I have no idea. Nobody does. So that's Nepenthes diariana, which is beautiful. And it's a piece of living history, as are the other Victorian hybrids that are still in circulation amongst collectors.
Wow. And he says one of its parents is Northiana. Is that right? Because there's the famous picture of Northiana, which was published in some Victorian gardening magazine.
Gardener's Chronicle, yes. That was Marianne North.
Right.
Is named in her honour. I can't remember who actually discovered the plant, and she did a wonderful painting of it, which actually, if you go to our website and look on our shop, and you find Northiana, you'll see the painting there.
Right.
It's a beautiful painting, and it hangs in the herbarium at Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew. Privileged enough to have actually seen it. So yes, Northiana is one of the parents of the hybrids, of the two hybrids that used to create this. So it's a quarter, if I'm correct, 1/4 Northiana. I think that's all that's in it. So you can actually see Northiana in the peristome.
Yes.
And it has Maxima and other things in it. So, they were. I don't think they were in a position to really choose what they crossed with what. It's like when we first started, we crossed anything with anything, because whatever flowered was crossed.
Right.
These days, we're very, very selective.
But it shows the very high success rate they had of just keeping them alive. I mean, they brought these plants all the way across the ocean for months and months and months in not great conditions. And they must have been happy enough to flower, and they figured out how to grow the seeds successfully. I'm just kind of curious, because you started to grow them after many, many decades of collections unfortunately dying because people couldn't heat them anymore. How did you have to figure stuff out yourself? Did you find old Victorian texts of how to cultivate them? I mean, how did you kind of restart the whole hobby, as it were?
Well, you can make some assumptions that the Victorians didn't have the technology we have these days to analyse soils and things, and find out what minerals are in the soil. So they would have looked at what the plant grew in its natural habitat and tried to emulate it. In the cultivation videos, we'll have a section on potting media where we'll talk about this. There's things like burned earth and things like that, which I believe they use. I've got to double check on that, whether that goes back to the Victorian times, where they take clay and bake it. And that works even today very well. But today we've got a lot more things to choose from. Almost too many, because there's quite a few things that are not suitable for Nepenthes that people are using. And as I said, we'll discuss that in a separate video. But it's quite impressive that they managed to actually grow them at all, let alone grow them to size and flower them and make crosses again. These people have been largely forgotten. Yeah.
No, so it really is amazing. You mentioned that you started doing some sort of collaboration and work with Marston Exotics, and when I knew of them growing up in England, that's where I first bought some plants for myself. I mean, not Nepenthes. As a little kid, my pocket money wouldn't have nearly stretched that far. But Marston Exotics is very famous at Chelsea. They got lots of gold medals at Chelsea back in the day, I think, for things like Sarracenias and Androsteras. And then you came along later. You obviously got lots of gold medals yourself. I'm just curious, who first started exhibiting Nepenthes at Chelsea? Was it you, or was it actually Marston Exotics?
Oh, Marston Exotics, way before we did. In the 1980s, he was exhibiting at Chelsea. And if you go back in history, you'll see on our website, actually, if you look at our new website, there's a photo of me, not AI.
Right.
It's a scan from a slide. It's been around, it's been circulated for decades, so it's well known. Of me holding a picture of what's now called Alice Putrana. And it's a Raja Babijie cross, which I discovered. So there's one we found. Somebody else named it later. Doesn't matter. And that particular picture was so spectacular. We shipped the picture. We left the plant alone. We shipped just the picture in a bucket to UK.
Right.
Air freight would have been very expensive.
Yes.
To Adrian Slack to use if he wanted in the Chelsea Flower Show exhibit. And Adrian Slack was a showman par excellence. And did he ever make use of it?
Right.
Yes. If you've got time, I'll tell you the story. But
no,
otherwise we could.
Please go on.
He put the picture on his stand on sphagnum moss, and of course it didn't have a plant attached to it. It had a tendril.
Right.
That was all. So he stuck the tendril in the moss, and I was actually there. And in the morning on press day, the TV cameras came and everybody else, all the press came, and somebody said to him, Mr. Slack, what's this? He said, I have absolutely no idea. He said, it just sprang out of the moss last night. And he said, and look, it's captured a vole already. And all the cameras, they had to go and change their lenses. The cameras went into the picture, and there was a vole floating there, dead. And
had it caught it? That's amazing.
Well, actually, Adrian had run it over that morning, or somebody had just in front of Adrian Slack on his way to the Chelsea Flower Show. And he thought, I'll make use of this. And he dropped it. I could say this now, Adrian's passed, but I wouldn't have said this some years ago. He dropped it into the pitcher, and it was an instant success. It was on the 9:00 news that night, which is the pinnacle of news. You know, it was a filler at the end. Look at this thing. If you look closely enough, you could see the tyre marks on the back of the vole. I mean, it's absolutely true. So he was a wonderful showman, really was. I'm sure everyone knew it was tongue in cheek, but it was a real picture and it was a big one.
Yes.
And I think that went a long way towards driving people to his nurseries, who were visiting his nurseries, saying, have you got any Nepenthes? And by that time, we were starting to supply him with species other than he already had. He had just 2 species. And we started supplying other stuff that we'd grown in our Coke tins in our basic nursery in Brunei. So
wow, that's an amazing story. I mean, the pitch, I think I know the picture you mean on the website. It actually looks pretty huge, and maybe that could have been a Nepenthes Titanic contender. It seems to be quite large.
I would think it certainly would be a Nepenthes Titanic contender. I've never seen a Raja that large. I've never seen a Raja as large as a 3.5 litre Raja that is currently holds a record, because it wasn't actually measured. It was just judged by eye, but that record stands, and I respect that. But that particular hybrid, that particular one, a particular plant, I've still yet to see a picture, I think, quite that spectacular. Because for the volume, you need the height and the girth, and it had both. Now, therefore, Rajas are a very interesting parent for a large plant. And I probably shouldn't say this, but in the coming weeks, Titanic is flowering at the moment. It's a male. We have a female Raja in sync with it. We will be crossing Titanic with Raja.
Wow.
And so if you want a quick way to get rid of your mother-in-law, I think there's probably scope there.
You mentioned that same large plant was something which you discovered in the wild, or rediscovered, and you've discovered other ones. I mean, we happen to be right next to your own namesake, Rob Cantley. Maybe you can explain a little bit about the story behind that, because I know you're really keen on conservation as well. I mean, you've even coined the term conservation through cultivation. What does that mean to you?
A lot. Alice Petrana, by the way, the picture in that photograph is a hybrid between two things, and that they can happen any time in history. So it's not a species to name. This is very special. This came from an area in Mindanao which was being logged, had been logged, and we got permission. In fact, we were taken...
And so that's in the Philippines?
In the Philippines.
Right.
Mindanao is in the Philippines, that's right. And it was a remote area. It was a couple of days driving to get there in four-wheel drive. And the whole area had been completely decimated, logged, for miles and miles and miles, and kilometres. You could just see dead trees and dying plants, epiphytes on the trees. And the first time I saw this was through binoculars. We could see what looked like a huge Nepenthes on this tree, dying. But we couldn't get to it because of all the fallen trees. It's very difficult to climb over fallen trees and actually get there. So we kept going, and we eventually found one growing terrestrially, not epiphytically on a tree, which was accessible, and it was a female. But it wasn't in seed at the time. So we photographed it and documented it. And as I said, I've never thought I could find anything original, so I didn't expect anything. And we eventually, after the third visit there, got seed and managed to put it into cultivation because it was a female that actually fruited, it had been pollinated. I think that whole area now is so devastated there won't be any more plants there. So we got seed and we raised originally 9 plants. We called it Black Truncata because we just assumed it must be some sort of truncata, but it was quite different from the truncata, which grows even in that area, and also flowers 6 months out of sequence with it. So indicated to us there might be something different about it, but I didn't know. And we exhibited it at a Chelsea Flower Show one year, and it was there on the exhibit, and created a lot of attention because there's a particularly big picture on it. The Queen of Hearts, we called her. She's a cultivar. She's here amongst this bunch here. And after the show, we went to have a chat with people at Kew, because Kew had helped us quite a lot with backing plants for the show, and I took them as a thank you. I cut a picture off Queen of Hearts, which has gone over a bit. Took it to give them the staff at Kew to put in their office. And their head taxonomist is named Martin Cheek. Dr. Martin Cheek, who's an author of a lot of Nepenthes papers, came in and he sat down for a while, didn't say anything, with a magnifying glass looking at the glandular structure. And he said, "What's this?" I said, "Nepenthes truncata." And he said, "Whatever it is," he said, "it's not Nepenthes truncata. Are you sure it's not you haven't hybridized this in your nurseries or something?" And I said, "No, it's a big plant." So he said, "May I examine this?" And he did. And then he said, may I have a herbarium sample, which I supplied to him. It went quiet for a long time. And then without informing me in advance, as a surprise, he published it with a very lovely engraving as well as Nepenthes Rob Cantley.
Wow.
Not Nepenthes Cantleyi, because there's already a hybrid named after me by somebody else in the 1980s called Cantleyi.
So you already had a plant named after you.
It was just a hybrid.
Right.
named by some German I didn't discover until years that had happened. So he named it Rob Cantley without me knowing, and in my honour, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And from those 9 original plants, we sold 3 as truncata. I think they went to Japan mostly. One went to Sunbell Exotics, I think, in States. And it was the 6 plants remaining. When we realised that it was something different, we obviously isolated them from the other plants we had, and we flowered them. And there's a flower spike behind you, which is about...
it's huge.
I mean, that's not as big as the one over there. Maybe, that's on the Queen of Hearts. It's maybe 3 meters long, 9 feet. And we hybridized them. We crossed them with themselves. Luckily, we had males and females. And sorry, it's a long story, but I'll finish now. And the progeny, we raised tens of thousands of seedlings. We gave them to botanic gardens. We sold them to hobbyists. We made sure they're disseminated throughout the world as much as we possibly could to make sure that it's safe in ex situ conservation, because the in situ conservation situation, at least in Mindanao, that part of Mindanao seemed hopeless. Okay. It may have been rediscovered since, but it's not been confirmed elsewhere. It was up in a tree and photographed, and nobody actually got the plant. So it might still exist in the wild, but it's a little dubious.
Right, right. And was that the kind of event that that kind of stimulated you to come up with the term conservation through cultivation? Which, I mean, I won't put words into your mouth, but from my understanding, that's really, using micropropagation and, the way that you can replicate plants to huge scale to kind of save them from extinction. Is that correct?
Yes, but not correct on the timing, because we'd used that term conservation through cultivation for at least 15 years before we found this, before this was named. When we first started Borneo Exotics in 1997, we used that phrase because I wanted to come and start a conservation project. And the idea was just a couple of people, very small project, conservation as much as anything. And then it grew like topsy, if that's an expression that many people understand these days. It grew organically. It grew into what it is today,
yes.
Which is it's a commercial enterprise. It has to be that way. But at the heart of it is conservation. We believe in conservation very strongly.
No, it shows. It's, the collection is incredible. I mean, obviously, to carry on the conservation effort, you need to have money and finances to keep that going. So you do actually sell your plants as well. I mean, and you do that through a process of selling your plants here wholesale. And I think you have a whole network of specialist retailers around the world, I think in like 20 different countries or something like that. So a hobbyist can go to your website, see a plant, find a retailer in their area and then order it. Why do you do that? Why can't people just go to your website and order directly? Well,
we did try that for a while. The main problem is because these are protected plants, even the hybrids that are artificial that can't possibly have come from the wild. If you cross a species from Borneo with a species from the Philippines, make a hybrid, it's got to have been artificially propagated. But they all come under the umbrella of the Confederation in Trade and Endangered Species, which is CITES.
Right.
And they're CITES Appendix 2 plants, which means you can export them okay, but with all the right documents. So you need export permits, import permits, can get very complicated, very time-consuming to get them. So we can't sell individual plants or even 10 plants. It just isn't viable. So we have no choice but to B2B, we have to sell directly to companies that already know how to import plants and they've got the facilities to take a bare-rooted plant. That's the other thing. You can't send it in a pot. It's too expensive to air freight and there may be pests. We clean and bare root the plants and they have to be re-established by a specialist really before they go to the hobbyist, who might be a newcomer to the hobby who wouldn't be able to handle a bare-rooted plant anyway. So very sadly, much as we would like to retail, it's just not technically feasible. It was in the 1980s, before Nepenthes were added to the CITES list, we used to sell small packages of plants to small growers, but we've unfortunately lost touch with that ability, and therefore we have got, as you said, distributors around the world, ever-expanding network of distributors, and they're all very carefully vetted before we accept them to make sure they know the plants, they know how to grow them, they can grow them properly, they can satisfy their customers. So if you do see a distributor on our website, it's somebody that we trust to handle our plants and represent our name.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. I mean, if someone is just starting out in the hobby, obviously there are some really common plants that you can almost buy in a supermarket, like elata, for example. Are there more unusual ones that you supply, which you'd recommend to someone just getting into the hobby?
Oh, elata's rubbish. You want Bloody Mary? Right. That's one of ours. No, elata's a very easy plant to grow. Right. You can't kill it with a hammer, as they say. Right. But yes, you can go in many parts of the world. You can go to a shop and buy Nepenthes. in a hanging basket. Usually not in very good condition because the shops are very low humidity and there's not any lights in there, but you can rehabilitate it. And they come from the Dutch nurseries, and the Dutch nurseries are growing only the easy to grow Nepenthes. So it's a good way to starting. Buy one of those, even if it's not coming from us originally. I don't mind. You start with something like that, which doesn't cost too much. Or go to one of our distributors. It's even cheaper. You can get a plant from one of our distributors. And they will hopefully recommend which plant you should buy, which is very easy to grow.
Right.
I mean, you can buy Bloody Mary from a distributor, or you can buy a big one in a hanging basket in a flower shop if you happen to see it. And they're the ones to start with. So if you've got no facilities at all, you can take one of those plants, hang it in the right place in your house, maybe over a sink. People grow them quite well in kitchens, actually, over the kitchen sink where there's a bit of humidity.
Right.
Got to have a pretty good light. Bathrooms.
I once did that.
You did it in the bathroom?
Nepenthes over my bath.
So you used to lie in the bath and stare up at the Nepenthes?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. Bill Bailey, a UK musician comedian, grew his first ones hanging over his dining table because he had a glass roof there.
Oh.
But of course, the other thing you can do is mist them by hand. So if it's relatively low humidity and you mist it a few times a day with a little simple hand mister like you might use for laundry, that helps a lot.
Right. And then I guess on the complete opposite extreme, I know you have the occasional auction, which I think are for particularly unusual, rare plants. I mean, in your mind, like what is like your favourite or a couple of favourite, like super rare, I'd kill for this plant kind of Nepenthes. Are there any on that list? Or maybe even ones you don't have in your own collection you'd like to have, or I don't know.
It's a tricky question. But the auctions are wholesale auctions simply because they're only available to our distributors anyway, as are the things on our shop. But when we first have a plant that we've managed to produce, and the first ones come out into the nurseries, we don't have enough to put them on our shop because we have too many customers, wholesale customers. So we auction them. A good example of one that we really like are villosa hybrids. We've made a lot of villosa hybrids, and if hamata is involved as well, wonderful teeth, wonderful, and it's squat. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful plant. I personally like wide peristomes as well, and the ones that don't roll back, they open up and they remain open, and then that's it.
And what would an example of that be?
Jacqueline spathulata, Jacqueline, for example. Spathulata has a wide peristome, so does Jacqueline. They remain fairly open. The hybrid is beautiful, and the peristome, the rim of the pitcher, doesn't roll back, so it stays beautiful. Unlike, say, veitchii, which will look fantastic for a couple of days when it's first opened, and then the pitcher will darken, the stripes will sort of disappear, and it will roll back.
Right.
So we like ones that remain flared. It's just a personal preference. Right. So people like toothy plants, by which I mean ones with the large peristomes and they appear to have teeth. And that's why I like particularly the villosa hamata. But if you were to ask me which species I like, my favorite species would be villosa. I just think it's got the most amazing peristome. Not only does it have the long teeth, but it has the very deep ribs, which gives it a tremendous appearance. And another one which is right up there with it, but much easier to grow, is Nepenthes hamata, particularly the lumut form.
Right, and then have the amazing upper pitches as well.
Amazing.
And is that something you've seen in the wild?
I haven't. I haven't been everywhere.
Right.
There's still time.
Absolutely. So it's really amazing, what you've achieved during your career. And if you were to list them out, so it really is quite incredible. From starting off with finding new species in the world, and most people dream of just seeing a plant in the world, let alone actually discovering new species. And then to have something which you've saved from extinction, then had it named after you. And that in itself would, for most people, would be, your career done, right? But then in addition, you've grown up a huge nursery, the largest in the world. You've rekindled what was a Victorian obsession, had to rediscover the techniques, built a whole lab in the process, discovered new micropropagation methods for that as well. Have this really strong conservation ethic with conservation through cultivation. And I really have to sort of question what's next. I mean, today you receive this certificate as well for having grown the largest pitcher in the planet. And yet I have a sense that there's more to come from you. I mean, I couldn't help notice, but you have a huge construction site over there. Maybe people can hear the sounds of construction traffic in the distance. Clearly you have some big building or something up your sleeve. What's next for Rob Cantley?
Firstly, thank you for your compliments. Flattery gets you everywhere. You'll certainly get invited back. Still got lots of things to do. I believe strongly in conservation through cultivation, and that's ex situ cultivation of plants means getting plants out there to people at good prices and all over the world. That doesn't just apply to Nepenthes as well. So the conservation aspects, we are tissue culturing and have been for a number of years, many years, other genera of plants that are not even carnivorous because we know they need help, but we have limited facilities. And we are building a very large lab. I mean, it will be easily the largest lab in this country.
Wow.
My heart is in the conservation, but also, of course, it has to be a commercial enterprise because it's going to employ hundreds of people. So it'll be a lab to do contract work for anybody who wants their plants tissue cultured, either somebody who's got a unique cultivar that they've developed, they don't trust to another lab. Hopefully they might trust us and let us do it for them and supply it back to them on a contract basis. Or maybe something that's fairly common in cultivation, which needs to be mass-produced for supermarkets or something like that. We're going to be equipped to output very large numbers of plants at a very competitive price. Within the next year, we'll be ready to actually start outputting. Although we've started work on it already, James. We've started taking the plants, initiating them into cultivation. We have our existing lab is currently a production lab for Nepenthes, but that will shift to the new lab, and the existing lab, the entire lab, and you've seen it, will become a research facility. R&D.
That's amazing.
To initiate difficult to initiate plants into tissue culture. Not all are easy. Nepenthes is a very good example of that, but there are plenty of others as well. So we're looking forward to doing that. It's good fun. We've already had considerable success. And moving forward, we're looking forward to trying it with many different genera of plants.
Wow, that's really, really incredible that you're still moving ahead.
At my age, yeah.
I didn't want to say that. I was trying not to say that myself. But that spirit is so admirable. You've achieved so much, and you're not just sitting back and thinking, well, I've got my fancy certificate now. That's it. I mean, it seems like you're just starting. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and the Nepenthes iceberg will come along, and definitely not. I mean, that's laying down the gauntlet for people out there to grow bigger plants and have fun competing. And I'll be very happy when somebody breaks this record, because then we've got a target to go for as well. Be warned, we won't give up easily. But that's the fun side of it. But the commercial aspects of it, the new lab is a commercial lab. But we're planning, with the blessing of our philanthropic and wonderful shareholders, to put a percentage of the efforts of this new mega lab, I like to call it a mega lab because it will be so much bigger than anything we've done before. It's 10 times bigger than our existing lab, into conservation work, pro bono conservation work, to try to promote ex situ conservation, especially on plants where in situ conservation, in other words, conserving them in the wild, is impractical. For whatever reason, the habitat's been destroyed or being destroyed, or climate change. It's not always the people's fault. It's often climate change. Rather than have them become totally extinct, there's two things you can do. You can have a seed bank, and the Millennium Seed Bank at Kew, for example, and there's others, preserving the seeds and hope they germinate 100 years from now or 500 years from now, whenever.
Right.
The other one is to maintain the plant in tissue culture, but not just one clone. You've got to maintain numerous clones to maintain the genetic diversity. Great fun.
Right.
That's where my heart lies, to be honest with you, is in that kind of work.
Yeah. Really incredible. Really incredible.
Thank you.
So in the words of the Guinness Book of Records here, I think you really are officially amazing. Thank you very much for...
As I said, flattery gets you everywhere. Yes.
Illuminating me and hopefully many other people.
My pleasure.
About everything you've done. And maybe you'd like to finish on just saying how people can buy your plants for themselves and add them to their own collection. I mean, obviously...
Well, this is a big part of the conservation through cultivation. The idea is to get the plants into cultivation with the hobbyist growers out there, of which there's an increasing number, are incredibly important people because they are helping to reduce the poaching of plants from the wild if they're buying legally propagated, artificially propagated plants which have come from a sustainable source. So I encourage the growers out there to keep growing Nepenthes, breeding them. If you've got species and it's flowering and you know somebody else who's got a species and it happens to be the other gender, you might have a male and somebody else has a female, talk to each other, swap pollen, give them pollen, share the seeds and disseminate it. So lots of people have it because some of the most endangered Nepenthes actually can still be bred in people's collections very successfully. And that actually is something we also concentrate on in these nurseries. We breed species, even if we've already got them in tissue culture, for no other reason other than it's a good thing to do for conservation, to keep the genetic diversity alive. And then we can disseminate different clones. That's why we sell lots of different clones. We rarely sell of an item, if it's a species, a single clone. We'll sell assorted clones, as we call it, so that there's a lot of genetic diversity within that bunch of plants that we're selling, which I personally believe is very important. Yeah.
And of course, you know, people like myself, a hobbyist, can obviously go to your website, select the plants, find a distributor in their area. I think, as you've said before, you have distributors in about 20 countries around the world.
That's right.
And that's how they can buy your plants.
That's right. They can go to the website, as you said, and in most countries, and we're still trying to expand the range of countries, you have several distributors. You can choose the one you like. Go to your distributor, look at their price list. You can compare it with our catalogue because our catalogue has everything that we currently offer on it. And if your distributor doesn't have something that's on our catalogue that you like the look of, ask them to order it for you.
Right.
There'll be a little time lag, but they'll get it for you and they'll supply it to you. So that's the best way to get these plants from us to you. The only way is through distributors. And don't be put off if a distributor says he's out of stock. If you see it on our shop, tell our distributor to take a look at our shop and please buy it for you.
Yes. And if you're after something really unusual, then you have your auction site. I think even if you're not a distributor, you can log in and
That's
at
true.
least as a guest, see what's available, ask your distributor to then bid for you.
Yeah, the auction website, I think, is interesting for a lot of people. We monitor how many people look at it. And it's a showcase for our new items that we haven't yet got enough of to sell in bulk to put on the shop. So usually they appear on the auctions about a year or more before they actually appear on the shop. And so it's one way to see what's coming that's new, but also you can get your hands on it because you can contact any distributor. They've got the right to bid on the auctions. And you can contact any distributor directly and you can say to the distributor, will you bid for this item? And maybe a batch of 5 that he's got to bid for to give you your plant, but you'll encourage the distributor to bid and maybe you can get together with 4 friends and take all 5 off his hands, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're small batches on purpose so that the distributor can find homes for all those plants fairly easily. So that's another way of doing it. Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much for...
Well, thank you.
First of all, inviting me to here. It's my 3rd time. Hopefully, I'll be invited back at some point.
Well, you said all the right things
exactly.
earlier. So
that's why I was doing it. And I'm hoping to be invited back a 4th time.
No, our pleasure. And I'm certain you will be back again. So I think we're also now to thank the viewers as well. That's, if they've watched this far,
yes,
they've got the patience of Job. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you
very much.
indeed. And do come back and do please subscribe to our channel. Thank you.
Thank you.